you, Dana. This is so exciting to start this archive of conversations or what's going on at school. You know, it's funny to be in a space where we really don't have very many visitors, and now we don't even have very many kids here. So, to highlight all that's going on, we use Zoom every day. So this is authentically HB. So thank you for joining. This is our second discussion. Our first one was with Stephanie Sims Brown, which was terrific. And I think that she signed up to be a part of this conversation today. So thank you, Stephanie, for starting us off. Just want to let you know that one of the highlights happening right now is a reimagination of EDO. And it's very exciting that the senior dean and the upper school and the music department is figuring out how to have this truly HB amazing rite of passage tradition happen. And it's going to include a car parade and a lot of speakers with Persona Houdier and Bless This House music. It's going to be with gifts and flowers. And then we're also going to have a special video. So it's going to be a bit different, but there's going to be an experiential part, and then there's going to be a video part. So as an alum, you will have access to that video on Friday morning, as per usual, where we usually gather in that center hall for that. So keep your eyes peeled for a new version of a timeless tradition. So it's coming your way. But I'm so pleased to have Margaret here. Margaret Appenheimer has been our Director of College Counseling for the last 4 or 5 years and has been at HB for almost 9 years. And she manages a team of extraordinary college counselors. One is Jesse Hernandez, who also joined HB 2 years ago. He used to work at Oberlin. So we have kind of the voice of what do the colleges want, or what do they see? We also have Britt Freitag, who came from Blair Academy, which was a very respected boarding school in New Jersey. And so we have another person from kind of the East Coast boarding school world perspective. And of course, Margaret, who's anchored that department. Amanda Seaford is a part of that team as well. She coordinates nearly everything. And this year we have 96 seniors. And that's to personalize that journey and that process for the family, for the students. It's another investment. And in many ways, it's self-discovery. Margaret really commandeers this. And Margaret, it is because of your leadership that we earned the distinction of being the #1 college prep school in all of Ohio, which is really something we're quite proud of. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you, and definitely overstated, but you know, I'm so thrilled that you all choose to tune in today. I know that we all are living in a Zoom universe, and sometimes one more isn't something that we feel like, but you know, in the college office, we can get so busy, and so in the nitty gritty, it is such a treat to take a step back and talk about what we do, because sometimes it can kind of feel like this behind the curtain kind of veil. So thank you for tuning in today.
So, you know, Margaret, I was giggling and laughing kind of earlier when we said I graduated in 87 and you were what, 89?
89.
And I think I typed my college application, like lining things up, you know, and using the whiteout if there was a mistake of some sort. And gosh, things have changed radically. So can you give us a little bit of a kind of maybe 4-minute primer on what is the landscape today for college admissions? Like kind of give us, you know, what is the, you know, it's radically changed. And even though we all went through that process, it doesn't look like it did when we went there.
Sure, absolutely. You know, it's interesting. I would say that the landscape is changing pretty rapidly, and COVID is putting another layer on it that we won't really fully understand the implications, I imagine, until next fall fully. But what we've even seen, like, for example, in our minds, in trends that we see, even 2016 is ancient history. We started to see very rapid changes beginning in 2018. And as I sat and thought about this, it really is oriented to the business side of enrollment management for the colleges. And so when we sit and think back what you had mentioned, right, back in our era, not only did you have to type your application, but you actually had to call the institution and ask them to mail you an application so that you had one to complete. As you are all probably very familiar with through your kids or your grandkids, digital platforms like the Common Application, the Coalition Application, the University of California application system, those digital platforms have to a certain extent made it much easier for one student to apply to many colleges at one time. So that is an issue, and I'm hoping I can bring it all together. The other issue at play is even though more people proportionately are applying to college and more of those individuals are applying to more colleges than ever before, actually the under 18 population is decreasing. So while there are more people applying to colleges, there are actually fewer bodies to fill those seats as we're looking ahead over the next 10 years. So colleges are working really hard to predict who will choose them. And, there's a caveat here because the very, very selective colleges sort of can keep doing whatever it is that they want. The rest of the colleges are focusing on tuition discounting and trying to predict who will come. The other layer is, society's focus on US News World Report annual college rankings. They can very much, influence who applies where. And so colleges are working really hard to jostle their way in those rankings for better or for worse. And yeah, I'm not going to bore you with the intricacies of it, but where we see it affects application numbers is colleges are trying to increase the number of people who are applying so that their admit rate is lower because this helps them in their rankings. They are also trying to do something called protecting their yield numbers. So a yield is you want to yield a high number of students that you give an offer of admission to. Well, as anyone who works with teenagers or lives with teenagers, it is actually hard to predict what they're going to decide to do. And so because of this focus on yield, colleges are relying on early decision at a greater rate than ever before because they then secure those students. Whereas 6 or 7 years ago, we were seeing colleges secure 30% of their class in early decision. In the last 3 years, we've seen that move up to 50%. And I think that in this particular cycle, there will be some schools that will build 60% of their class in the early decision round. So there's that piece. And I don't mean this to all be, I know it's sort of a lot of nitty gritty, but the reason it's important to note is the second piece, something called demonstrated interest. And this has really affected the job that the students need to do. So if a student is not applying early decision, she is then faced with the task of showing the colleges that she's interested, because as they are looking at her application, they are also trying to gauge, if we give her a spot, will she come? So did she interview? Did she open the emails we sent? Did she click through the links in the emails? And so data analytics have become a big part of it. So as the students are writing all of these supplemental essays and their main essays, they're also having to navigate this additional layer, which, is a lot. And I would say that our students, this senior class, I just feel really bonded to them. And I don't know if it's because I have a senior myself at home, is a male, not at HB, but they have just been so amazing every step of the way. I would say that some things with COVID that we are seeing is, as you probably know, the vast majority of colleges nationwide are test optional. So what we are currently seeing in this early round is the nation's very, very, very most selective schools have skyrocketed in their number of applications because there's a lot of students nationwide that figure, you know what, my test score was previously a barrier. I'm gonna go ahead and go for it now. However, on the whole, as of November 2nd, applications nationwide were down 8%. So it'll be interesting to see. So I probably gave you more information than you want, but it's really a business which can sometimes make you want to take a shower at the end of the day, for sure.
Well, and it is a business. And, you know, you're right with the data analytics, and you're right with it kind of nuts and bolts. And now that you can measure so much, you know, they are fighting with those measurements. And yet at the same time, you have this little girl who comes into your office and says, "Hey, Mrs. Appenheimer, you know, I have no idea where I want to go to school. I think it's small, and I think maybe I want to stay in Ohio. I really don't know." Tell us a little bit about the philosophy of that moment of an HB girl, and how our college counseling process for them as an individual, as a, you know, as a student, helps, is a part of their whole educational experience. So what is our
Sure.
philosophy, I guess, and how does it make us
Yeah.
different?
You know, it's interesting. I feel, and I think a lot of this is grounded in my many years in the classroom, is that this is very much an educational endeavor, and it is very easy for one to view the college admissions process as very transactional. But we firmly believe, especially when you think about, and backing up a little bit, you know, those of you who were able to tune in or follow or read about when we had Rachel Simmons come and visit us in the fall of 2019, who wrote Enough as She Is, and talked about, you know, high achieving girls and how they can tend to tie their self-worth with a whole host of achievements, including, you know, gaining admission to colleges that say, you know, no more likely than not than yes. And she gave us a lot of important food for thought that we always really knew about, but felt it was important to us to formalize as an office, that we are firmly tied to the social emotional well-being of our students. So we anchor our guidance, and we communicate this to students and families the best we can, and we ask them to embrace it as well, around like these four kind of values. And the first is this notion of self-awareness. You have to know who you are, to know what you want, and to know where, you know, you're a good fit. And the better a student knows herself, the smoother her college process experience is. And actually, the more successful it is, because if you know yourself, you can communicate who you are to your colleges. So we work hard in junior forum and our one-on-one meetings to you know, really dig deep into that. We also emphasize this notion of student agency. You know, the student needs to be the driver of the process, and she has tons of support from us, from the Writing Center, from her parents, from her mentor. But you know, what we have noticed is this is one of the first times that a student is faced with something that is really uncertain. She doesn't know the outcome. And when she realizes that she is in control of it, and is the one who can decide where she applies, and is the one who decides where she's going to attend, it's really empowering. And when she sees the grown-ups have confidence in her to make these choices, she then has confidence in herself. So we believe fully, you know, the student is the only one to ever call the admissions office. So we gently tell the parents, you know, let her arrange the interview. Authenticity is the third piece. You just have to be yourself. You don't need to be what you think they want you to be. And I think we can all agree that whether you're applying to college or not, you're a teenage girl, embracing who you are is really critical. And then the last piece is it's individual. No two college processes look the same, and we have to communicate time and time again. We understand that there is a somewhat, you know, set time frame that the colleges put forth, but we meet the students where they are. And so we encourage parents and kids to resist the urge to compare their process to that of other people, because it's a lesson in futility for sure. Yeah, so we take a whole lot of pride in that. I think that we also, and it's interesting, I've been thinking a lot about this group, and I had mentioned earlier, this notion of uncertainty, right? I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know if in this pandemic time, if that is exacerbated or if it has diminished that notion in relation to the college search. Because this is the first group of students we've worked with that actually do have a sense of uncertainty larger than college admissions. And so we wonder, and I don't really know if it's given them an additional, more mature perspective. We also it's really easy to get into a frenzy about college admissions. We try to do all we can to bring the temperature down. We know that it always works out. It just might not be what you originally thought it was going to be. We firmly believe in encouraging students to put themselves out there. We don't want them to fear rejection. We want to normalize rejection. And I think that when, a lot of times students will sit and think, oh my gosh, I'm so worried they're going to say no. And we say, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Okay, I feel lousy for a couple of days, and then we pick ourselves up and we keep going. So a lot of the great opportunities for growth that I think serves them well, not just in college applications, but in other things.
Yeah. And I so agree with you with that agency piece, where they feel empowered, right? And that's that confidence that lets them get themselves back up again, right? The more agency they have, the more confidence they build for those moments when they do have those things well articulated. And, I'm so glad that so much of the philosophy you just articulated really is the philosophy that really backward by design starts even in kindergarten, right? It's, authenticity and agency and partnership. And, it just seems like a natural culmination of all that we do here socially and emotionally to send girls off with strong wings, right? Their own wings flying in the direction they want to go. So that's, it's really great. I think when you and I talked a little bit about, our success, so much of it has to do with our reputation for distinguished academics, clearly, also for social and emotional, really grounded girls, but also with that knowledge and action piece, those fellowships, those centers, those things perhaps that other schools don't really holistically create opportunities for. And so many of our girls take part in those fellowships, which are, not required, not graded, and something that they want to do. And it seems that's a secret sauce, so to speak, for us. How do they factor into an applicant's profile?
For sure. So, for many of these colleges that our students are applying to, everyone who applies has really strong grades in a really demanding course of study. That's sort of just a given. And I feel strongly that what sets our students apart is their work in the fellowships for applied learning. Because of these experiences, our students are both interested and interesting. And those are two really critical traits that you need to be able to have as you're looking at college. And, a massive part of their college application is being able to write about things that are important to them. And our students believe deeply and have taken great action in some really, some true real world experiences. So and I was just thinking about this senior class, right? So whether they're, lobbying for energy legislation as a sustainability fellow, or being in charge of human resources at the HAFCAP as a business and finance fellow, or hosting a series of podcasts on Black Lives Matter, or writing a senior thesis on the environment and fast fashion, which is like, inexpensive sort of disposable clothing that's often made in Southeast Asia, and the economic and environmental impact of that. Like, those are really interesting things. So when a student in a college interview, or when she is having to write about, what is a cause you believe deeply in, she actually has something to say, and she can speak to, in many instances, the leadership that she has shown and the action she has taken behind it. Colleges really want a sense of who will this person be when they get here. And our students are looking for colleges that are going to give them an avenue to continue these experiences they've started in the fellowships for applied learning. So when the colleges are reading their applications, they get a sense of, oh, she's going to be doing not all of these things, but these things that we do offer. It gives them purpose. It gives them a sense of direction. I would also say that it really provides them an interesting bit of insight. students nationwide still change their major 3 times on average in undergrad, and I don't think necessarily our students are really different than that. But we do have, I think, an exceptional number of students who have a pretty clear sense of what they want to do in college. And I would say the fellowships in applied learning really did help contribute to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's sometimes it helps because they had an experience, for example, maybe in a lab at Case, and they know that they don't want to be a research scientist, right? So sometimes knowing what you don't want to do is equally as valuable as knowing what you do want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. And, Stranad is a part of that too.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's where we have, it's not just the fellows, I mean, but I love that this group has also been almost combining things, right? So it's, if you could, case lab and business, but if you want to do something about medical, the economics of medical research, Stranad has been able to find those individualized projects too, which is really neat. So question about the challenges that you see in your office. And, I think back to, we had Robert Post come, who is the Yale law professor, I think about 3 years ago. And we had lunch and I had asked him, I'm like, so have you ever had any parents call you of law students, asking about papers or grades or something like that? And he giggled. He said, actually, in the last 3 years, he had a couple parents call. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, my relationship isn't with the parents. It's with the students. And he kind of giggled and laughed about it a little bit. But, it is a huge investment that parents are making in their child, just as HB is as well. But the strings, you let go more and more as a parent, right? You don't raise them to keep them, is the line in the parenting book that I think was the hardest one. And I think I burst into tears as I read that way back when. But what are the challenges, maybe for the families, as you see, as they go through this process?
It's interesting. I think it depends on the family. And I think that, parents who have gone through the college search before with an older child, they just actually really know it does all work out. And that sense of calm that they can help exude, is just helpful. They know it always all works out. I would say, in a typical year, many parents, usually the moms, spend the senior year beginning the process of grieving of the student, like their child is going to be heading out, right? It's the end of an era. So this, in conjunction with, don't want our kids to be disappointed, they get a no, in conjunction with thinking about the big costs coming, it just can be stressful. Sure. And so that is a challenge. And I think also balancing the notion of, yes, student agency, and I'm paying for this, and I would like to, if I feel like you're making a horrible decision, like, let's talk this through, right? So that can be challenging, for sure. I would say for the students, challenges, I think I'd mentioned, anything from uncertainty to simply the workload, to this notion that you need to be perfect. We wholly embrace done is better than perfect. And a lot of our really high achievers, I say to them, listen, you're going to be in a job one day that's going to probably demand a lot of you, and you're going to have to move at a quick clip. So sometimes done is just better than perfect. Let's just go ahead and submit it. We'll keep moving. So we really try to embrace this loving mentality, for sure.
Yeah. I think so many funny moments with COVID, right? Which have been, like, one of them might be that a child may actually end up on a campus that they've never seen until they actually show up the first day, right? I mean, and that has given great opportunities to really market or experience a school digitally in different ways. It's nothing, it obviously won't replace walking on campus and seeing your people there, but there's been a lot of innovation too. What kinds of things has your college office experienced, perhaps, that are the positive sides of reimagining what we've had to reimagine with this extraordinary time that we're in?
Sure. Well, just to build on what you mentioned about the ways students are going to learn about colleges. So, you know, now's the time of year where we're starting to chat a bit on the phone with some colleges and get a sense of how things are going, and, you know, are you going to be open, and so on and so forth. And they said, well, listen, we don't know when we're going to be open for visitors, but we do know that virtual offerings are here to stay. And I think that as we look ahead to our juniors, who we will soon start working with, I think they're really well positioned to do some preliminary research of the robust virtual offerings that these colleges have put in place, from being able to sit in a sample class to attending special sessions on anything from athletic recruiting to dorm life to BSMD programs to the college's work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, you can start doing your homework now. And then when we are able to hit the road, it can be more targeted, because any of you who recall maybe your own college visit tour, or you've taken kids or grandkids, it's a big expense in time and in money. And I'm hopeful that this will help kids be more targeted to visit places when that time comes. Right. Another sort of, you know, to be honest, I think I see us sticking this route is typically, you know, we collaborate with CCIS schools on a number of things, and the role that HB has is every year we coordinate and host a financial aid workshop that features a director of financial aid of a institution, and it's held usually at HB in the dining hall, and all of the CCIS families of parents of seniors in the fall are welcome to come and hear this thing, and we, you know, put in a work order for it to be videotaped, and like in a couple of weeks we'll be ready to send out. So we had to shift that. That was not going to work this year. So we shifted to a Zoom event, and then we're like, oh, okay, well, wait a minute, let's think for a minute. You know, typically we'd have to have our guest speaker be, you know, within driving distance, at the most 2 hours, be maybe more an hour. So all of a sudden we can widen our network. So we were able to get the director of financial aid from Yale to be our guest speaker. And that was so wonderful. A, because he's a wonderful speaker. B, he has institutional knowledge of colleges with a wide range of funding methodologies. So he was able to speak not just to a super selective place like Yale that only meets need-based aid, but could talk to a lot of different things. So we were able to get someone just different than the other awesome people we typically get. But what we noticed is we used to have, it would maybe be like 50 families of all the schools would come approximately. We had triple that number this year. And I don't know if it is the ease of being able to attend. I don't know if it is, you know, people, there's sometimes some of, you know, with the webinar feature. So there's, you know, you can sort of sit and do the dishes, right? As you're listening to this thing. And the thing that was so wonderful about it is he also brought from, you know, New Haven, his colleague was manning the Q&A function. So while he was giving the presentation, we were able to, it was almost like two presentations at once, because the questions were coming in so fast and his colleague was answering them lickety split as they went. So we got a lot of positive feedback for that. And then the very next morning, the recording was ready, and I was able to send it out to everyone who wasn't able to attend or who wanted to take another look. So when we did a debrief with the other CCIS schools, we all agreed, like, we don't see ourselves, you know, going away from this model. It really did work. Another thing that I was thinking of, you know, Jesse and Britt and I are planning ahead, thinking about second semester as we start working with the juniors, and second semester is when the bulk of our time is spent in family meetings. So it's the student and the parent, and we really kind of talk about, you know, what things are important to you, an exploratory list of schools, you know, next steps. And it's extensive. It's at least an hour, you know, maybe an hour and a half. And in previous years, you know, they'd come into our office, and we would always try to be flexible with timing, but people have to get off work, and, you know, it's a thing. So starting in, I think I still had maybe about 10 families left as of April 1, right after spring break last year when we were fully remote. And we were noticing, and we didn't know if it's, again, just sort of the mood of the pandemic or whatever the case was, but the families seemed so much more comfortable. on Zoom than trudging into our office. And I imagine, once visitors are welcome back at school, there will be families who will prefer to be in person. However, I wonder, we will always now offer Zoom family meetings as an option, because we then found, a parent we would have one parent at home working from home with a student who was home and another parent who was at work, and we're all able to dial in at the same time. And it's funny, we commented as the college counselors, and we're looking back, we were so surprised how quickly, once we went on Zoom, the students were like just talking to us. And we wonder if there's any correlation, for the kinds of one-on-one meetings, between being in the comfort of your own home, that you feel a little more confident. So yeah, there's some things that are going to shift the way we do things moving forward, for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that's almost been I mean, we can say the best part is really having to reimagine or why you do it, and asking yourself those questions, and just being able to go from good to great at every moment. Margaret, it is 12:35, and I would love to take a couple questions with folks who might have something on your mind. You can either put that in the chat, where you can click at the very bottom, it says chat, and type your message into that little box, or certainly you can raise your hand. I think there's a reaction piece, and we can unmute you, and I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Okay, Molly Heron. Let's see, Molly. There you go. You're unmuted.
I'm an older alum, and I have a grandson, and because he's a boy, he's not as wildly interested in thinking about college yet. He's a junior. So will this recording be available to us that we could share with family members? And how do we do that?
Yes, absolutely. We will publish this. Dana will send it to you after this is over, and then we'll also try to log it on our website. So yes,
okay,
you will have access to it for sure.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
So
Yes,
we have a question. Oh,
Ginger has a question.
yes.
I unmuted myself.
Good.
One of the things I've always loved is that HB announces in the spring its college acceptance results by saying X%, it's always more than 80 of our students got into their first choice, or if they grouped them, one within that group, which to me speaks so clearly to what HB's college process is focused on, which is the girl, not the status of the school she got into. One thing though I've always been curious about is, do our girls stay and graduate from the school they picked? Do they know themselves well enough, in other words, that when they say, this is where I want to go, it turns out truly to be the right choice for them? Or do they transfer at the same rate as everybody else does?
Great question.
It's a great question. I would say we don't have a formalized way to track it. However, it is not uncommon for end of October of freshman year for me to get some emails. I'm thinking of transferring. Can you help me? And we talk through it, and she almost always decides to stay put. And a lot of that is, I would even argue the first year of college is just rough. It just can be really rough. And we sort of talking through, okay, who is your person there? Who is your go-to person there? And reminding them, you have people there, and if you don't, let's figure out who they are. But I would say in my time in the college office, so I've worked with every group the last 7 years. Mm-hmm. I think we've had 2 kids transfer that I'm aware of. Remember that if a student transfers later in their journey, like junior year, they don't need anything from the high school. So I wouldn't have a way of knowing unless they told me. But I think it's an interesting question. I think it could be something worth, like tracking, right? Because the whole point is not just getting in, but staying and flourishing. We did an interesting, I don't know if you remember, Fran, I don't know, a couple years ago, little survey of young alum. So they were students who were still in college, or like maybe had graduated from HB in the last 4 years. And we had pretty good response rate. I think at least 50%, but don't quote me on that. And one of the questions that was interesting was, what were you planning on studying when you got to college? And what are you studying now? And a shockingly large number seemed to have stayed the course, which isn't, I don't know if that's a benefit or not, but I thought that was interesting. Again, it was not by any means like a scientific survey. I'm sure a better survey writer could have written it.
So it is 40 minutes and we have 2 extra questions here. And I just want to let people, if you need to go, because it was 40 minutes with Fran, and I honor that you may have something else on your calendar for sure. And Dana, if you want to stop recording, you can, but Margaret and I will stay on for another 10 or 15 minutes and until 1 o'clock, we'll put a hard stop on this and answer some of the other questions that are popping up. Margaret, one of them is, are you seeing kids stay like a more closer to home kind of thing? And then another question is, how do you manage unrealistic expectations of parents or students?
Margaret, before you answer, I just want to thank you again for everybody, and we will send out the recording and we'll save the questions. And so that way, if we need to try and get back to folks, we will. And then just wanted to tell everybody, don't forget that, as Fran said, we'll be sending out the link to the reimagined EDAO information that'll come out on next Wednesday. So make sure you tune in for that. And then in the new year, we are unveiling a new online alumni directory. So get ready for that, because I know you want to figure out how to keep in touch with folks. So that's all I'm going to say.
Great. We'll keep going for a little bit. Go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, so I would say yes, I am seeing more, especially just in the climate we're in. I am seeing students choosing to stay a little closer to home. We actually do. We have a couple of girls who are interested in going into Europe, so we'll see how that goes. A little less California than I typically see, but I think the biggest piece I'm seeing is an increased rate of application to our public flagship institution, Ohio State. And I think there's a lot of, with uncertainty with the economy, wanting a great education at a great value. And Ohio State has gotten also increasingly competitive. But I would say yes. And I think that it's yet to be decided if that mentality of staying close to home will remain. I think a lot of the spring outcomes in terms of health conditions will play a role in that. In terms of expectations, that's sort of what we do, is expectation management. And I guess thinking about the kids first, I'm so sensitive to that. And I a couple of years ago, I read Michelle Obama's Becoming, and there's that story she tells of her college counselor when she says she wants to apply to Princeton, and the college counselor just horrible and diminishes her and says no way, and of course she ends up going there. I don't ever want to be perceived as a gatekeeper to a place for a student, ever. And so always trying to strike that balance of, hey, listen, you want to go for it, I support you, and I just want to make sure you have all the information that I've been seeing, all the facts. It's hard to not get a little cynical in this line of work, because the colleges don't often surprise me. Do you know what I mean? I'm not often super surprised by outcomes. And so I find that I always want to do it. And I don't know if it's a hokey word, just in a really loving way, right? I just want you to have all this information. I think for the parents, the kids set them straight. The kids become such experts, and they will say, hey, listen, and the kids often end up really doing that the lion's share of that work. And there are also times where I, want to keep the peace for everyone, the parent and the student included. And it's funny, when I first started, I because I approached the meeting like, it's so exciting. We're like starting college and I can't wait to get to know you all. And let's talk about list of schools, and not realizing there's some parents who come at it with a lot of anxiety, worried about what I'll say, worried about the kinds of schools I'll suggest. And I really always want to be really empathetic to that. And I want them to know, like, hey, listen, you don't need my permission to apply anywhere. But let's think a little bit more about where she's going to be most successful and most happy and flourish the most. And I get sometimes nervous when I'm asking, like, what is the, what are you hoping for in your daughter? And they'll say a top 20 school. I'm like, well, I need like some more specific. So I hope that people feel heard. It's always, sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I'm not. I try though.
It's interesting. I think when you have the experience of dropping your child off at a school, and I remember doing that with my daughter. And I actually did some college counseling on my journey as an educator. And I remember thinking, you're going to have to drop your child off, but in a room you've never seen, with another child you've never met, with teachers you'll never meet, in a place you don't know. And then you drive away and you think to yourself, my job is done. Like, it's them, it's up to them. And that's a very humbling moment to kind of be there. And so it's interesting, you've mentioned a couple of times parents who've been through it once. The second time around's a whole lot more in the know of what the whole thing really feels like and means. Another question here is, daughter is a junior, does great academically, but does not have the extracurricular areas she excels in. She's been more of a, quote, explorer and she's struggling with how to sell herself to colleges. Any advice on that one?
And I think, so she's a junior. So this junior class, their activities, boy, oh boy, right, have been to put a dent in them, right? If we take a look at from end of March to where we are now. And so I think the one thing to be rest assured is I think even that particular age group, nationwide, colleges aren't going to see the extent of engagement in long-term activities as one would think. I would say explorer is not a bad quality to have. And what she might really want to think about is thinking about colleges that will give her room to continue to explore a bit. And I can't advocate enough, a college with a liberal arts curriculum is going to allow her to do that. In terms of the selling herself, by and large, the transcript is the most important piece always, right? Given that she's an explorer, I also tend to think she's a thinker. And if you're a thinker, then you have a lot to say about stuff. And that's a good thing, because when she's having to write her college application, her various supplemental essays, she'll have things to say. So I'd recommend a couple things. She should be interested in stuff, because you need to have things to write about and talk about. So to be interested in stuff, like if she can, too few of our kids unfortunately have the time to be a reader. She should read and read and read and read and read. And I would, and they don't have to be like War and Peace. I mean, it can be just some things that she likes, so that she's just really thinking about things. I would also suggest that she attaches herself to a real world issue that she cares about and is following in the news. As you know, colleges don't want to have what we call navel gazers, like people who are just always looking inward, but someone who's able to see, all right, I live in a larger community. Here are some issues that we are faced with. I feel strongly about this, and I'm thinking about taking action this way. And I would also recommend, I can't emphasize enough the power of getting a job. The power of getting a job, and colleges are emphasizing time and again, employment is very valued. and having family responsibilities. We actually have a significant number of seniors this year who have younger siblings who have, and these students have been in charge of Zoom school for the younger siblings as they're also navigating things. And so when we communicate that to colleges, we do. So I know I've gone all over. I hope there's a little bit of an answer in there somewhere.
Yeah. We'll take one more question and then we'll sign off here. But Margaret, you did get a lovely compliment here saying, my daughter is a current HB senior, and I just want to say how grateful I am for the work of Margaret and her staff. They're amazing. You are amazing. Your team is amazing.
Thank you.
And so, in this COVID environment, there are three creative ways. Are there creative ways to visit a school and help your child get a feel for the campus when you're not allowed to be there? And then maybe just one brief comment on standardized testing.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you go to any college's website and you go to visit, click visit, and what will populate is all the virtual events they have. And they will have tours where, you know, there's someone walking around with a camera. This is this, so you can do a tour that way. You can do, if you're interested in applying to their engineering program, they will have a panel of engineering students and faculty members there for you. You can even sit in on a class if possible. So they've really tried to be so creative. You can get it. They might have a whole virtual session on the dining halls and dorm life. So I would say dig in. And not only does it help the student to learn about the college, but when you sign up, when your daughter or son or granddaughter or grandson signs up for these things, they will ask for his or her information. And that's another avenue to demonstrate your interest, which is all the kind of big business of college admissions. The testing. Are you seeing a change in standardized testing requirements? Yes, but also to be determined. So, you know, just about all colleges except Georgetown and the public institutions in Florida are test optional this year. And so there are some colleges that have decided they're going to do a 3-year pilot of that. There are some colleges that will fight tooth and nail to require tests again next year. And there are some colleges that are going to wait and see how this cycle goes. In my calls I've been doing over the last 2 weeks, I've been reminding them, like, hey, listen, you know, a lot of us are still in a situation where you're like, you know, can't go sit for a test. So when are you going to make the decision about class of 2022? So I think they're starting to feel the heat on that. And I think that they will decide that at the latest July. The thing that's really interesting, though, is the University of California system. So UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, you know, massive server of students. You probably heard in the news that there was an injunction placed against them in September because they had gone test optional like many places. And the plaintiffs said, hey, listen, test optional puts me at a disadvantage if I'm unable to get a test because I'm unable to be viewed in the light with a test. So the University of California system is test blind this year. They cannot look at any tests. They have historically been the bellwether of things to come. And so it will be very interesting if test optional is ultimately viewed as unfair. Mm-hmm. And if that is the case, you know, there will be a real reckoning. And I would say that if colleges feel they can build I mean, here's the reality. It's a very selective colleges are going to be the determiner of where this is going to go. And if they feel that they can build strong classes without scores, the ACT and College Board, you know, they're scrambling. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know is the answer to the question. Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, it's interesting, Margaret, there's a lot we don't know, certainly. And I had the opportunity to have a conversation with Bill Gates the other day. I was on a Zoom session with him, 20 people with Bill Gates. And he said that the educational field has made a decade worth of change in less than 9 months. That this has been such an accelerator to new ways to do things, new thinking about things, and change in an industry that really, in some ways, is change adverse, because colleges really do look very much very similar to how they did even when we went there physically. So much is changing radically. And he also said, which was interesting, that online education should be better than the real thing by college. And I thought, well, that's terrifying. But I could understand what he was saying. You know, you're going to have experts be able to do the guest lecturing, and you're going to have people to do the teaching. It's just going to perhaps look a little differently. His futuristic vision on higher ed was certainly quite different than what it is today. And COVID will be an accelerator to change in education for sure. Well, Margaret, this was just delightful. Dana, fabulous time. I'm so glad we had this opportunity to chat with everyone. Loved your questions. Thanks for taking the time for 40 minutes with Fran and Margaret here. And I wish you all a wonderful, safe, and happy holiday. And thank you for joining. And again, keep your eyes peeled for EDO to celebrate with us, all your HB sisters and families. It really will be a special moment. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.